Hello everyone and welcome to the new series of Azure webinars brought to you by the Cloud Solution Architects here at Ingram Micro Cloud. My name is Nigel Mullings and I'll be discussing the 2020 Spring Update of Windows Virtual Desktop, which is now generally available. I've tailored the agenda for this L300 Part B webinar based on the feedback from Part A last week. We received some really good feedback and lots of queries about installing themes and creating golden images, so I thought it'd be useful to cover those off. The L300 series of webinars are generally more technical, so I will go into more detail around installing themes and setting up host pools using golden images. Today's agenda will cover off the Windows Virtual Desktop service at a high level, the global reach, and it's always worth running through the Windows Virtual Desktop architecture. Then I have a few short demos showing how to install themes, create a master image, and use that image to deploy a new host pool. Then I'll quickly run through some of the new features and RDP settings for Windows Virtual Desktop in Azure. And as always, all of our webinars are available on our Content Hub and available to watch on demand. Microsoft have made some huge improvements to Windows Virtual Desktop with the 2020 Spring Update. Remote working is becoming almost the norm nowadays, and Microsoft's Windows Virtual Desktop service is enabling remote working for thousands of customers around the world, and this new GUI enables customers to quickly deploy Windows 10 multi-session host pools in minutes. This is an overview of the WVD usage over the last year since Microsoft released the service. The Windows Virtual Desktop optimizations on this slide, which are the large light blue squares, have been added in the last year due to the dramatic increase in the service. The service metadata will also be available in more regions, starting with Europe later this year. And Microsoft also used Windows Virtual Desktop to enable remote engineering and support remote internships and empower new employees to onboard prior to receiving their new laptops. A lot of partners ask us how they can use the familiar tools they already have for Citrix and VMware in the move to Windows Virtual Desktop. Citrix and VMware are two of Microsoft's strongest partnerships with the service, and Microsoft have seen that customers recognize the value of having these partners hosting their service on Azure. Microsoft have also built out their own control plane, which was driven by customer demand for a first-party solution where customers want to simplify and reduce costs. With Windows Virtual Desktop, you get access to a full Windows 10 desktop. You can publish applications, whether they are line of business apps or third-party applications, and access them remotely. You focus on what's specific to your organization's deployment. So you set up your policies, VMs, networks, config, and users, and that's what you focus on. You don't need to spend any time worrying about the underlying infrastructure, such as connection brokers or maintaining server VMs to power the service. Microsoft handles the complexity of running the service in the cloud, so you can focus on what your organization needs for your deployment. Traditional public cloud services offer VDI solutions that map a single user to a single virtual machine. Now, this may be appropriate for some of your customers, but a typical virtualization environment has a mix of multi-user and single-user host pools. The primary reason for multi-user host pools is to reduce costs and management overhead. We all know that a typical task or office worker rarely consumes the full resources of their desktop. If you were to provision each user to their peak needs, you'd be paying a lot for resources that you're not using, which is the white space in the images here. Now, if we consider a real-world scenario where I have 24 of these task workers and I was to provision VDI instances in the cloud, inefficient use of resources start to create a significant gap between what I'm paying for and what I'm using, In this case, I would require 48 vCPUs and 96 gig of RAM. Now we know that a typical virtualization deployment has pools of identical VMs that host large numbers of users. And you as the IT admin want control over how users are allocated across those VM pools. Windows Virtual Desktop provides two core load balancing methods to provision users to VM host pools. The first and default is breadth mode, which evenly allocates users across the available VMs in the host pool, and this helps ensure that users are getting the maximum amount of resources. Windows Virtual Desktop also supports depth mode, which allocates users to a single VM before allocating users to the next VM. This mode allows you to better control your variable costs as you can spin up additional VMs as needed using the scaling tools. The service will dynamically adjust user allocation based on the amount of VMs available. Microsoft provides a few scaling templates you can use, or you can modify them to create your own scaling algorithm to meet the needs of your business. So this is the high-level architecture of Windows Virtual Desktop. And as you can see on the right-hand side, starting at the top, Microsoft will manage the web access, diagnostics, gateway, management, broker, and load balancing. This is the PaaS service. You would then have control over and decide on such things as what operating systems, applications, and how you want to access the environment. Microsoft would then manage the underlying virtualization of that IaaS infrastructure, such as the compute, storage, and network. And this has to be designed to your business specifications, so you'll have to have input on design considerations such as IP address ranges and network address schemes. So as I mentioned earlier, I've tailored this webinar based on some of the feedback we received from the L300 Part A last week. And part of those queries were around installing applications on your session hosts, configuring themes, creating golden images. So before we dive into any of that, let's just do a quick recap of the environment that we built out in Part A last week. Before I install themes on the session host, let's do a quick recap of the environment, see what we built in Part A of this L300 WVD Spring Update webinar. So if you remember, on the left-hand side here, we created the Active Directory virtual machine as part of the prerequisite. We gave it a domain of onprem.com, created some users, WVD users 1, 2, and 3. And then we installed Azure Active Directory Connect as part of the prerequisite and started to synchronize this on-prem domain or this Active Directory domain with my Azure Active Directory. So then we created a file server to act as the file share for FSLogix and user profile containers. This is the folder we created, shared it out, and this should be user 3's profile container disk from when he last logged on. So user profiles are configured to point to this virtual machine in my Windows Virtual Desktop deployment, and that was done as part of the prerequisites. So then we built out a host pool consisting of 2 virtual machines. These are the 2 virtual machines. This is FSLogix got downloaded and configured on the 2 session hosts, and the configuration points them at the file share here. So in Azure, so I've logged into Azure. This is the tenant. I'm in Azure Active Directory. If you remember, we had the free tenant. So my 3 users have synchronized over, WVD user 1, 2, and 3. This is the account that got created with Azure AD Connect. And this is my my Azure Active Directory account, which is a global administrator in Azure Active Directory. So that's the environment. If you remember, we had Windows Virtual Desktop pinned to the dashboard, I've also pinned another tile which I'll come onto in a later video. So in Windows Virtual Desktop, we've got a host pool consisting of those two session hosts. They're both up. None of them are unavailable. If you remember, we've got two session hosts, WVD VM0 and VM1, both on the onprem.com domain. And if you remember, none of these have Teams installed. So I'll just log on to confirm that we don't have Teams installed on these session hosts. So if you remember, it's just log on to Remote Desktop Client, put in the feed discovery address from the documentation, which is at the connect with the desktop client at the bottom. Windows Virtual Desktop, take the feed discovery, and connect, subscribe to the service, and I want to subscribe with one of the users. So if I look at the application groups, the desktop application group assigned to 3 people, I'll just take user 1. And just log in with user 1. And you should see the session desktop and some applications that we also published in the application group. This was the session desktop, which you can see I've changed the name of it in here, so it's now called Windows 10 VDI instead of session desktop. But you'll notice on here that there's no Teams. It's not installed on the session hosts. Okay, although my Office apps are installed and I'm publishing some of those. So that's the environment. Let me just log off with this user. Sign out and unsubscribe. So that signs out of the Windows 10. And then unsubscribe from the service, from the workspace. And close that and that'll log off. So if you remember, I had some applications as well. 4 apps being published, which we just saw user 1 having access to. So that's the environment that we're working with, and I now want to install Teams on those session hosts so my users can access Teams and do collaboration. So the place to start with that is right here. If I just go back to the documentation, at the bottom here you can see Use Teams in Windows Virtual Desktop. So let me just pause there. Okay, so that's the environment. That's the Windows Virtual Desktop deployment that we've got. And now let's go back to that Microsoft documentation and see how to get Teams installed on those session hosts. Okay, so back in the Microsoft documentation for installing Teams, there are a few things that we need to run through before we do the install. So a few notes at the top of the page. Remember, the Teams install documentation is under the how-to guide down the bottom here, Use Teams. And there's a note on the chat and collaboration. So it tells you here, Microsoft Teams on Windows Desktop supports chat and collaboration. With media optimizations, it also supports calling and meeting functionality. So this is the optimizations that we mentioned in part A for Teams. So with media optimization for Teams, the client handles audio and video locally for Teams calls and meetings. So installing Teams, there are a few prereqs: prepare the network, install the desktop client on a device that meets Teams hardware requirements. So nothing special there, but you may want to check those for a production environment and then connect to a multi-session VM, which we do with one of our users. So install the desktop app. Show you how to install Teams desktop app on your Windows 10 multi-session, which is what we've got. And we've got our 2 session hosts that we're going to be installing this Teams app on, and we know it's not installed on there already. And so preparing your image for Teams. So to enable media optimization for Teams, we need to set a registry key on the host. So that's the first thing we need to do, and it's basically to say that it's a Windows Virtual Desktop environment, give it a value of 1. So we're going to create a Teams key under local machine software in each of the hosts, give it a is WVD and environment keyword with a value of 1. So let's do that first. That's the first thing we need to do. I'll start from here. Onto Edit. I'm in local machine already. Local machine, software, Microsoft, and then we want themes. And as you can see, it's not installed. There is no Teams key, so I'll create Teams key under Microsoft. Keyword. Compress that. Doing this will enable the install to go ahead. It'll tell the install that it is a Windows Virtual Desktop environment. Software, Microsoft. Don't think we've got Teams. Just double check. No, we don't. No Teams. The value of 1. Okay, that's the first bit done. And then you need to install the Websocket service. So when the optimization for voice happens, it's using this WebRTC redirector service. You need to install that first. We're going to install that, download and install that with RTC. If you encounter any installation errors, install the latest Azure C++ redistributable. So do that, and then do the Teams. Download the MSI package. There's 2 ways to install Teams, per user or per machine. I'm going to do the per machine install, which is basically just download the package and run this line pointing to the MSI. So I've already downloaded these locally, and if you remember, these machines connected in here, you can see my local drive. I'll just copy those installs over from my local machine and run those installs. There's Teams. And that's the WebRTC redirector. Do that on both. Just taking a minute to copy those over. So this one's done. There's the WebRTC, and should have Teams on my desktop as well. Yeah, okay, so I'll install this one first. For the previous attempt. Completed, okay, so that's good. Fairly straightforward. Next Teams, install the WebRTC first. So it's relatively small, this package. That's quick, and then it should let me install Teams. This is the download, and it wants to install this with a command line. So we're doing a per machine, so that's this line. Let's copy that into PowerShell. I'll just run this as administrator. So we're going to run this line. Path to the MSI and a log file name. The log file name can be, let's see in a bit, can be Teams install log.txt. The path to this is my desktop, so let's just get in there. And log down as an admin desktop. The path to the MSI is there. And then the name of the MSI. Okay, so that should install Teams as a per machine install. Per machine. Okay, so I can run that. It's fairly quick to do the install. Just copy that for the other machine. Just get this running on here. Same location. Should be good, I think. Yeah, it's on my desktop. Okay, so that's done, that install, it's completed. Let's see. So Teams installed on this session host. Just completing on this session host. And then we'll log on with one of the users to see what that looks like for a user that should be prompted to log in for the first time they access Windows Virtual Desktop using a desktop client. Just let that complete. See the icons just appeared. Teams is installing. Done. Completed. Got the confirmation here. So that's the installer complete for Teams on both session hosts, according to Microsoft documentation. And there are additional things you can configure with Teams, but for the defaults, just accepting the defaults and getting Teams installed on your session host without anything fancy setting up. That is pretty much it. So now I'm just going to pause the video and log on with one of the users and have a look, make sure that they see the new install on their session. Okay, so that was fairly straightforward to install Teams on the session host. So let's see what that looks like for my user one logging onto the service. Now Teams has been installed. Okay, so now I have Teams installed. Let's log on to my Windows Virtual Desktop environment with one of my users. So just remember the host pool, got my desktop application group, which is the session desktop. So this is where my users log on to this session desktop. If you remember, we changed the name of the what the users see when they log in to Windows 10 on the session desktop. So my users both got access. 3 users have got access to my session host in this host pool. I'll just get the username. It's the desktop application group. These are the 3 users. Just log on with user 1. Remember, we use this desktop client, the new desktop client, and get the feed discovery address from the documentation of how-tos and how to connect to Windows Virtual Desktop with the Windows Desktop client. And then down the bottom is the feed discovery address, which will get us into the solution. So connect to a workspace, add the feed discovery address and subscribe with user 1. And we're expecting him to now see Teams when he logs in and be asked to configure his new app that's been installed on the session hosts. So this is the Windows 10 multi-session desktop consisting of my 2 session hosts. Log on with his on-prem credentials. And we can now see Teams installed. The same obviously would happen for any user that hits this host pool with this with these session hosts in there. Loads Teams. Teams starts as normal as you would expect, and you can see his credentials are in there. It's asking him to sign in straight away. It might need this username. It does actually. The user 1 logging into Teams for the first time. Obviously, every time he connects after this, Teams will be configured. It doesn't have to do this every time, same as you would in your own desktop client in your Windows 10 machine. And he's then ready to chat and use Teams. That's the normal startup wizard. So that's how to install Teams manually on your session host. Once you've set up your session host, you've built a host pool, you would then log on to them into each session host, however many you've created, RDP to them, and do the install. And then your users, when they access the solution, as you can see, they have access to use it as they would normally on their Windows 10 machine. So these remote users now have full access to Teams. The settings that you can change for Teams, the redirection you can do from within Azure. So as I've mentioned, it's relatively straightforward. There's a few things to do to get Teams up and running on your session hosts, but it is relatively straightforward. There's just 3 steps. You're just going to do the first of all, you're just going to do the registry, set the registry, and then download the redirector, set the registry to say it is a Windows Virtual Desktop environment, download and install WebRTC redirector, download and install Teams using PowerShell, and then you'd be ready to go with Teams. Okay, so we've seen how to install Teams on our session host, what it looks like for the users when they access the service, and I mean, that's great for a test environment. Maybe you couldn't imagine having to do that for multiple host pools where you might potentially have tens or hundreds of servers in host pools, servicing thousands of users potentially. And you wouldn't ideally want to go and install applications on each of those session hosts individually. And with that in mind, and just going back to the feedback as well, Microsoft have also documented how to prepare golden images for Windows Virtual Desktop host pools. So let's assume that I've tested my Windows Virtual Desktop service and I want to roll it out to production. So now I need to create a golden image that already has Teams installed and perhaps a line of business application. As always, using the Microsoft documentation, I've already created a golden image. So let's dive in, have a look at what that looks like, and I'll show you how to deploy a host pool using my golden image. So here I am back at the Microsoft documentation, and we now want to create a golden image, install Teams, a line of business application, and use that for my image for all session hosts going forward. So for any host pool I want to create, I don't want to keep reinstalling Teams every time I create a session host. I want to create a golden image that I can use anytime I want to create a host pool. So in the documentation, as with all capabilities for Windows Virtual Desktop, you go down to the Customize Session Host image, set up a master VHD image, a virtual hard drive image. So this is documentation how to create that image and use it as a golden image for your Windows Virtual Desktop environment. So it tells you how to prepare a master VHD for upload to Azure. So there's two methods. Firstly, so Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session is available in the Azure Image Gallery, first of all, and there are two options to customize the image. The first option is to provision a virtual machine in Azure using the instructions create a VM from a managed image, and then skip ahead to software preparation and installation, which is just down here, software preparation and installation. So create a VM from a managed image. Well, we're trying to create a managed image, so we'll have a look at that. And this option here, the other option to customize the image, is to create the image locally by downloading it, provision a Hyper-V VM, and customize it to suit your needs. So you basically build a virtual machine that's going to be your image. The first method is to create a VM from a managed image, or to create a Hyper-V VM locally and then upload it to Azure. So looking at this create a VM from a managed image link, that's going to take us to generalized image settings. So to create an image, you basically, before creating a new VM, you need to create a managed VM image to use as a source, which is what we're attempting to do. And the shared image galleries is where we are going to end up with our image. So have a look at this. Create a managed image of a generalized VM in Azure. It's basically telling you to set up your VM, and once you've finished setting it up, do one sysprep on it. So you run sysprep, you tell it it's going to be generalized, change the shutdown options to shutdown, and then don't restart the VM after that. That's going to clear all the user-specific information and get it ready as an image, basically. So you've generalized generalized it and it's turned off. And then once you've done that, to create the image, there's a create an image in the portal. That's actually put me into the portal. Create a managed image in the portal. That's going to take to the portal. It's going to basically tell me to use the image that I've just created. So there's an option to do it in PowerShell. Let me just go back to the creating the image gallery, creating a managed VM image. So that's talking about generalizing it. So you basically create your VM, do sysprep, machine is then generalized. And then once you've generalized your VM, you want to use your generalized image, you then can, the idea with these shared images is that one managed image supports up to 20 simultaneous deployments. So you can create 20 machines simultaneously from the same image across regions. You can replicate this image to many regions. The way to do it, once you have generalized your image, go back to the Windows Desktop documentation. So let's go back again to setting up the master VHD. Creating the image is simply creating a VM in Azure. So you can see here this additional tile that I've pinned. I've just clicked back into Azure and I've already created this image. So let me show you what that looks like and how you go about setting up the image to use in the shared image gallery. So in my virtual machines, you'll see here that I've also got this WVD image VM at the bottom. And if I just select that, you can see it's stopped and deallocated. It's a V2MS, and it's Windows operating system. And it's got the Windows 10 multi-session, so I can use it for Windows Virtual Desktop. It's got public IP, see the size of it. It's just literally a standard machine. Installs the anti-malware extension. And then, because it's stopped and deallocated, so what I've done, I created this machine and then connected to it in my RDP session. As you can see, it used to, but it's still there. It's stopped and deallocated now. And once I've connected to it, I've installed Teams, same way I installed it on the session host earlier. And I've also installed Notepad++ as a kind of line of business app to demo a line of business app being installed in my image as well. And then joined it to the domain. So it's on my ADVM domain. If you see now, I've got this WVD image that was joined to the domain. And that's the Windows 10 multi-session image that had been generalized. So had Teams, had Notepad++, and then run sysprep. And then sysprep shuts the machine down, and that's the state that the machine is currently in at the moment. So once it's been shut down, you can then create the image from it. And the way to do that, and you do this with any VM, the first thing would be to create a new resource. It's as simple as creating a new Windows server. But the operating system, when I get to the operating system, I'm going to pick my Windows 10 multi-session OS. So I'm going to have to search for Windows 10. To find the OS. So the image that I want on my new virtual machine. And here's Windows 10 multi-session, and you can see that when I press select, I get the different versions. So 2004 is the latest, Office 365 installed. So you literally just create a virtual machine with that image, pick the size that's available to you, and then just go ahead and create that. So you've got your virtual machine, you've installed what you wanted, RDP'd onto it, joined it to the domain, and installed what you want, like I say, and then it's stopped and deallocated. So if I go into the resource group for this virtual machine, I'll have a quick look at what I've created. You can see I've got this image definition, image version, and shared image gallery in here. So what happens when you've created your Windows 10 multi-session virtual machine, this one, Windows VD image, when you want to create an image from it that you can use shared image gallery, you simply capture the virtual machine. So you can do capture, and this is going to create a shared image gallery name. You give it a name for your shared image gallery. It's generalized. Some basic information to create the image. Give it an image version. I just left mine as 001. And basically that's it. It's going to, you can say how many replicas of the image you want, what hard drives you want, what type of disk you want to be included in the image, and then you're ready to go and create the image. And what it's going to create for you, you can delete this virtual machine after the image has been created, because you can never use it again. It can't be started. It's not going to work because it's been generalized. So then, if I just go back into the resource group, I'll show you the image that it created. So this is the shared image gallery. The rest of the resources I could delete. So I can delete this disk, this NIC, the NSG, the IP. I only need the image version and the image definition in my shared image gallery. So in the shared image gallery, the image looks like this. So you get a definition, it's called a definition. You can see it's generalized. That's the resource group it was in, and that's the location. Go into the definition, I get a version. This is my version that I just left at 0.0.1, my image version, and this is what I can create virtual machines from, or create virtual machine scale sets from, or add another version. I can see the some settings for the CPUs and memory that I can set as recommended for the image when I'm deploying virtual machines from it. So let me pause the video there, and then I'm going to show you how to deploy a host pool in Windows Virtual Desktop using this shared image gallery image. That's a quick overview of setting up the golden image or the master VHD image for your session hosts. So let's go ahead and create a host pool using that new golden image. So just to recap on preparing a master VHD image, the first thing is to create a VM from a managed instance, and then go to the software preparation and installation, which is below. So once you've created your VM, it's going to bring you back to software prep and installation, where you would normally configure FSLogix, Defender, disable automatic updates, do these additional activities before saving and generalizing your VM image. Using this Hyper-V method, you would then, if you've created it in Hyper-V, you're then going to upload the VHD of that Hyper-V VM to a storage account, storage blob account in this case, and then you will have an image. It'll create an image, tell you it's ready, and then it just says now you've got an image. You can create or update host pools, which you could do using these links. So if I just go back to the top and revisit creating a VM from a managed image, which we've done, creating the image itself is building a VM, put your operating system on it, generalize using sysprep, and it just a reminder here, after you've run sysprep on a VM, that it's considered generalized and cannot be restarted. Generalizing a VM is not reversible. If you need to keep the original VM functioning, you should create a copy of the VM. So you do the generalize, then it tells you you can't then use the machine, it shut it down. And then to create the image, you just, from the portal, go to the VM image. From the image, you can select capture. So from the VM that you've created, it's now been generalized. You're just going to go to it, as we saw earlier, hit capture. That's going to create the image for you, or you can do it in PowerShell. But once you've got your image, essentially, you're ready to go. So back in Azure, when I created my image of my VM image virtual machine, I pinned the shared images gallery to my dashboard, so I can always access it here if I need to. Not that I need to. Once this is created, you only need it to refer to. And remember, I've installed Teams on this, I've joined it to the domain, and I have also installed Notepad++. So just a quick recap of the image in my shared image gallery. So this is the shared image gallery. This is the image definition. So the definition has the version inside. The version is where I can update the replication for this image and say which regions it gets replicated to. But essentially, the actual VM, if you remember, is turned off and deallocated. So we're now going to go ahead and create another host pool using this image, and we'll create a couple of session hosts using the image to show you how you do that. So back in Windows Virtual Desktop, same as you would normally create a host pool, we'll just add another one. So I'll call it same as this, but host pool 02. So it can go in the same resource group as my Windows Virtual Desktop deployment with my other host pool. Call it host pool 02. And the metadata in the US, as we know, it's not validation and it's going to be pooled. It's Windows 10 multi-session operating system, max 2 users, and the default breadth first. So this time when I come to the virtual machine, I'll pick my location. It's going to be in UK South, so it picks up my VNet. I'll say I want 2 of these, give it a name, so I'll call it WVD image VM. So I'll get image VM-0 and 1, same as my first host pool. Okay. And then the image type, it is a gallery image. And then when I select browse all images, if I go to my items, rather than a marketplace, I've got my own items, shared images. I can see my Windows Virtual Desktop image definition. So let's pick that up. It's picked up the latest. So I'll just show you that again. In my items, I've got shared images and my shared image gallery with my image definition in there. So I'm just picking that. I can still say the size of the virtual machine. So if I just wanted a B2MS, for example, small, 2 CPUs and 8 gig of RAM, it's just the image that I'm selecting. And pretty much the rest is the same, except all the defaults. I'll use premium SSDs instead of standard. I've got my latest image and the VM joiner account, same as my original session host. So my nmadmin account. Okay, then a workspace. I don't have a workspace. I've got workspace 1. So I'll just create workspace 2 for this. Have the same naming convention. Google Micro Cloud WVD workspace 02. I'm not using tags, so review and create. So you can just see the image is my image definition. Validation's passed, so I'll just go ahead and create. So this will create my another host pool with 2 session hosts using my gallery image. And I'll let that deploy, pause the video and we'll come back. Assign a user to this host pool and just log on and see that Teams and Notepad++ are installed. So as you can see, the deployment has completed successfully. Let's have a quick look before I go in there. I should see the machines joined to my domain now. So there's image now. I should have 2 session hosts in here. Just refresh this. There they are. So these two machines have joined the domain. If I go back to Azure and have a look at the actual host pool, so I'll go to this resource. This is straight inside the host pool, so let's just go back to do that from Windows Virtual Desktop. If I go into here now, I should see two host pools. Yep, so here's my new one using my new image that I created earlier. One application group, which is the desktop application group. See, this one's got apps as well. This has just got the desktop. So two session hosts, same as the first one. WVD image VM0, image VM1. No one assigned yet. So if we go into the application group, see it's a desktop application group with no users assigned. So let's just assign user 1. Get him logging on and seeing if Teams and Notepad++ are installed in his session. So it's been given access to the host pool, same as the original host pool. No applications, just a full desktop. So I'll just go in and log in as user 1 to my workspace. Just go back to connect. Remember how to get the address to connect to the solution. I'm on Windows VMs there. That's Windows VMs, virtual desktop, and then connect with the desktop client. I'll take the feed discovery address, same as always. Subscribe to the feed discovery with my user 1. Just take him from here. So now I should see two workspaces, workspace 1 and workspace 2. One with apps. There's workspace 1, here's the new workspace 02, my session desktop. Can't connect for some reason. Let's try that again. Make sure they are up and running. All servers and the infrastructure are up. File servers up, yes. Images down. That should be alright to connect. Let's try that again. No longer have access to that app. Okay, let me just log out and log back in. Could be that. I do have access, just be giving myself access. Let's just check the config. Nothing else to do in here. So desktop application group, it's in workspace 2, it's in host pool 1. I've got one assignment. Session hosts, check the session hosts are up, which I think they are. One unavailable, nope. They're both up now, if they were unavailable. So let's just try from a browser, actually. So in private, RD web, and feed discovery. On the user, actually. Okay, so same thing in a browser, two workspaces. Okay, so this is my on-prem credentials. and it's WVD1, I think is what they log on with. Okay, so get my Windows 10 box, that's good. And then we should have Teams and Notepad++ installed in this image. So if that's the case, you can see how advantageous this can be to get a golden image set up and created. So then every time you create a host pool in any region, remember you can replicate this image to any region. And as you can see, Teams is installed straight away. Notepad++ is installed. And this is my freshly created host pool. And just confirm the machine that I'm on. So I'm on Windows 10 Enterprise for virtual desktops, which is Windows 10 multi-session. You can see it's that WVD image 01 with everything installed, ready to go. So you can see how easy it is, and the same experience for Teams the first time it's been installed. Access, same as my host pool 1, where the user's being asked to sign in straight away on the new install of Teams and configure his own session. This is representing line of business application that has clearly not been installed with the operating system. It's installed into the image, saved into the shared image gallery, and then the host pool deployed using that shared image. So hopefully that shows you how to create a golden image, which I can now use for creating individual machines or Windows 10 multi-session host pools, and have my apps pre-installed and ready to go for my users. Traditionally, when you are making real-time communications connection in Windows Virtual Desktop, what happens is the traffic of the call is routed between the virtual machines. With AV redirection, a point-to-point connection is created between the two endpoints using WebRTC, and this is a more efficient way of connecting two endpoints, and it creates a much better user experience for the people on the call. They get better latency and a much more natural calling experience. Above and beyond the improved user experience, you also get improved performance as well. So your utilization in your virtual machine goes down, so you can get better density to reduce costs. To give you a view of that, this slide has just two screenshots of Task Manager, one running without AV redirection and one running with the Teams optimization that takes advantage of AV redirection. And you can see that there's a reduction from 12% CPU usage to 1.5% CPU usage, which is a huge reduction that goes right down to the VM density you are able to pack into your virtual machine, which is a huge cost saving if your users are doing a lot of calling and collaboration. So finally, to wrap up this Windows Virtual Desktop L300 Part B webinar, I wanted to just continue with the video and audio collaboration capabilities from within Teams that we just touched on, and show you how you can take advantage of some of the settings that have now been brought into the Microsoft Windows Virtual Desktop Management Blade for each of the host pools. So for Windows Virtual Desktop host pools, there's now this RDP properties capability, which I've touched on in the previous webinar, but I'm just going to go through some of the settings in here, particularly as we've been talking about Teams and its capabilities. So the connection information, there's a couple of settings here, whether or not to use QuidSSP, and by default, RDP will use QuidSSP if the operating system supports it. The session behavior, there are 4 or 5 settings in here that you can enable or disable, so reconnection, bandwidth auto detect, network auto detect, session, whether to enable RDP bulk impression, and there's some little bit of information around what these options are doing. And then video playback. So this is a setting where you can use multimedia streaming for video playback when possible. So some new capabilities brought into the RDP sections, but for the audio and video capabilities, you can see here Microsoft Audio and Video, Microsoft Redirection. So if I enable audio capture from the local device and redirect to an audio application in the remote session, so Teams being the audio application, I can take advantage of the AV redirection in Teams, which is using that WebRTC that we installed to do the communication over a point-to-point session inside the session host. So two users, both on Teams, talking directly to each other over a point-to-point connection using WebRTC, which is a much smoother, more efficient way to communicate and gives your end users a better collaboration experience within Teams. So you can just turn that on and off in here. It's enabled by default in Teams if you have the latest client, but then you just enable it in the RDP device redirection settings. And then some of the other settings that you can change. So you can enable encoding of redirected video, audio output. You can see some of the settings. I won't run through them all, but you get the idea. Local devices and resources, camera redirection, for example. So don't redirect cameras, redirect all manually into a list of cameras. And there's a fair few settings that you can change to determine how to access your different devices, so USB, printers, COM ports, etc. So just a quick overview of how to take advantage of some of the RDP capabilities that have now been brought into the Windows Virtual Desktop Host Pool Management Blade. Apologies for the sound on that previous video. I just noticed it was fairly quiet. But it's essentially just showing the RDP settings being brought into the management blade. So you can now just turn on the AV redirection capability with a simple radio button in the RDP properties of the host pool. So just coming to a close of the webinar, and Microsoft announced recently the following updates to Windows Virtual Desktop at the recent Virtual Ignite event. And one of the cost-saving features which we've been advised will be released this year is the Start VM on Connect feature, which will let you power down all of your session hosts, saving on running costs. Then when a user connects to the service, the session host fires up to accommodate the connection. So just before we wrap up the Windows Virtual Desktop L300 Part B webinar, I just want to show you the Start VM on Connect feature, where it will be and what it's going to look like. So we're in a host pool, looking at the properties of the host pool, and we can see at the bottom there highlighted in red, Start VM on Connect, and it's a simple yes or no. So this is going to allow you, as I said, to power down your session hosts and just have them turn on when they're needed, which is a huge cost saving. So I hope that's given you an insight into the new 2020 Spring Update of Windows Virtual Desktop. And if you have any questions, I will be around after the webinar for Q&A. So get your questions ready, and I'll talk to you shortly. So finally, to conclude the Windows Virtual Desktop L300 2020 Spring Update Part B, we covered off Windows Virtual Desktop coverage and usage around the globe, the Windows Virtual Desktop high-level architecture of the service, and looked at how to install Teams on your session hosts. Also run through the documentation on how to prepare your golden image and then deploy a host pool using that golden image. Then a quick overview of some of the Teams optimizations, AV redirection and how that works, and the Windows Virtual Desktop Remote Desktop Protocol properties brought into the Windows Virtual Desktop solution within Azure. So you can now take advantage of AV redirection in Teams by simply enabling that capability within Windows Virtual Desktop. Finally, I'd just like to say thanks everyone for joining today. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to watch our webinars. I hope you found it useful and informative. And as a quick reminder, I will be available shortly for a Q&A session on Windows Virtual Desktop. So have your questions ready and I'll do my best to answer them for you. Okay, I'm going to dial into the conference bridge for the Q&A. I shall see you over there. Hi everyone, Nigel here. I think you'd be able to hear me. You should be able to hear me. If anyone can confirm in the chat, I'd appreciate that. So I'm here to just answer any questions you've got around Windows Virtual Desktop. I hope you found that useful. If you've got any questions, I'm just going to hang on for 5 minutes and whiz through anything you want to know about the service. I'm just wondering if anyone can actually hear me. I don't see any. I don't see anything in the chat windows. So I can see a few attendees on. So can someone just confirm if you can hear me or not? Okay, maybe you can't hear me. Let me just type something in there.